Hi guys, it has been a while. I wanted to do something a little different today, which is a painting video. Basically, for the past 6 months, I have been teaching myself to paint by painting every single day, and I wanted to just do a video of some tree studies. The point is to really focus on one thing, so maybe sometimes that's the form, or the colors, or maybe composition in a small landscape study, but I'm really just picking one and focusing on that only. I try to do as many as I can, so usually at least 2, but I've done even as many as 8 before. I do them on this oil primed paper, and then I usually cut them up into the small squares. But sometimes I will do them on an oil primed notebook like this one here that I made. I sort of jump around in the pages depending on what the last one was I painted on. But each one should only take about 20 or so minutes, give or take, and the point is to start and finish as many paintings as possible when you're just learning how to paint. All you need is this oil primed paper and some tape. I'm not particular about the brand, but I do care that the oil primed paper has this canvas texture. Sometimes you'll find them and they have like a watercolor texture, so I don't care for that, and I much prefer having a canvas texture. Sometimes I'll tape it to the back of the board, but usually I just tape it to my easel. But yeah, when you're just learning to paint for the first time, I think it can be really daunting to get everything perfect, and these tree studies really allow me to let go of that idea. I don't have to get everything perfect. I'm just focusing on the one thing, or maybe 2 things, but one is more secondary than the other, and it's really freeing that way. So I am starting with a burnt sienna wash, and one thing to know about these oil primed papers is that they dry pretty quickly, so a super thinned out wash like this doesn't really blend super smoothly, but that's okay. It's just a study. I'm getting my sketch in, and my focus for this study is going to be mostly the values of the tree and just trying to distinguish it against the background. I would say in the end I am mostly successful in this, but that's why doing them over and over again is really important. I don't always start out sketching my trees, but I do it sometimes, so I wanted to show that process here, and in the other one I will do it a different way. So I'm just getting a darker green value in for the shadowed areas, and I like to have this really kind of expressive brush stroke, so that's kind of the style that I'm leaning into as I paint more and more. And then going right in with a lighter value. I sort of maybe don't always do these in the order that I might do a more finished painting, since I am really focusing on the trees themselves. In this case, it's the tree itself, so I'm starting with my trees and really getting them situated in the scene before working on the rest of the context of the scene. Whereas, in a bigger or a more finished landscape, I might, start with the sky or work my way backwards to front or something like that. I think in the tree studies especially, it's important to try doing things differently. Maybe not each time, but a lot of the times that you do them, it's, as a new painter, it's helpful to try different techniques and try doing these in different orders. so that I can figure out what I like. So here I am getting some sky in. And I do think, even though my focus is, value and a little form, I think providing the context in the rest of the scene is part of building the tree. That's not a step to leave out. Definitely, I always make sure to have sky and ground, because cutting into the tree is building my tree. But yeah, when I do these studies, I try to do them in anywhere from 15 to like 25 at most minutes. I think, having a time limit is really important. You don't want to spend a trillion hours on these. That's just not the point. I am trying to just get this idea down, work on my one thing, and move on to the next one so that I can fully start and finish a painting as many times as I can in a setting. So here I am just getting a lighter blue or green value in the background to kind of push these trees that are in my reference image a bit further back. But yeah, that's something I'm learning as well as these months go by, how to make changes from what I see in my reference to how I want it to be on my paper or my panel. That's been surprisingly difficult, I've found. So I was happy with that green overall color, but I started to apply this slightly darker blue to indicate some shadows back there. It wasn't quite dark enough, so I think I'm darkening it a bit more, and then I go in a bit after that. But here I am using like a dark plummy color to get some tree trunks in, and I love to use purple when I'm doing my landscapes, especially for the super darks. And that is a big color for trunks and branches for me. Another thing that I had to really, really grapple with was this kind of, and people talk about it all the time, which is the ugly phase. I think until you actually start painting, you don't really get what people mean by that, but it seems like every time I paint, there's that moment where I'm just like, oh no, this looks terrible. But you just have to keep going, and then you figure it out. So I'm getting the lightest value of my trees in and sort of bringing it much farther down, because when I do look at my references, the leaves go pretty close to the ground. It's not kind of like your typical broccoli shaped tree here. I'm not sure what trees these are. I did take this photo myself near where I live. But this is the part I love the most. I love doing this highlighting of the tree, and you can see I'm kind of rolling my brush. Maybe you can't see that, but I'm sort of rolling my brush. Sometimes I like that technique, sometimes I do just drag it, but because the oil primed paper it dries so quickly, it gets quite sticky, I find. So sometimes I have to roll the brush. I'm just going back in with a slightly lighter gray purpley color over, some of the darker areas, over top of the trunks a bit where the super dark purple was, just sort of bringing it closer. And here I'm just bringing like an even lighter gray purple into those back trees so that there's a little bit of definition back there. I didn't want it to be totally flat. And I'm just putting a few small highlights on these trunks with like an even lighter gray purple color. And now for a surprisingly difficult for me section, which is the grass. And I think I've been forming some theories why I find this so difficult, but mainly it's because I struggle to get the right both value and color for the grass. It's always too dark, and I even think in this moment it is too dark. I think one issue is that, just simply speaking, when it was time to buy all the oil paints at once, right, because I'm just starting out, you know, I made some choices. I had to make some financial choices. I couldn't buy all the cadmiums, all the cobalts, all the everything, the very expensive paint. But those paints are expensive because they have a lot of pigments in them. So I think that the lemony yellow color I got, which is just called Winsor Yellow by Winsor & Newton, maybe it just it doesn't have as strong of a tinting strength because I really struggle to get these like bright grassy greens. But I'm just going back in with a little bit darker, bluier value in those background trees just to sort of round them out and give them some depth. And I added a little shadow in the grass as well, which I think overall made all of the grass much darker than I wanted. So I'm just going back in right now and getting a bit of a brighter grass in a more highlighted section. And that is the first study. So on to study number 2. Just starting out again with a burnt sienna wash. I didn't always do this, but I have been doing it recently. I'm trying to do it for every study now. This one is just going to be another tree, and I'm doing it a little bit differently, where instead of sketching out the tree, I'm sort of going for it. This is a technique I use frequently. It usually produces some of my favorite tree studies. I am just gonna admit, and maybe it's just like the pressure of filming, it turns out great in the end. I'm actually pretty pleased with it, but it was a bit more of a chaotic journey getting there than I would have liked. So as you can see, I'm just taking that super dark purple and I am just going for it. I didn't sketch it out. I'm just getting I'm squinting at my reference and I'm just putting that dark purple where I see my darkest darks. And then I'm going to go in right away with like a dark green, but this is slightly lighter in value than the purple, and just kind of fill out the rest of the tree shape. One thing I couldn't really tell was happening while filming this was the glare on this second one. So there is a bit of a glare, and I apologize for that, but at the end I will show it more straightforward with no glare. But yeah, I'm just kind of winging it, getting those highlights, higher key greens on there, and this is where things get a little chaotic. Yeah, my shape got a little out of control, and I fixed it towards the end, but it was a journey getting there. So I'm just sort of going back and forth between the darks and the lights. But I decided to move on to the background, and I put this kind of greeny blue color back there, and I didn't really like it for grass, so I go over it with a more green, like it's meant to be a bluer, more desaturated green. However, it just kind of wasn't, so I go over it, I think, one more time after I finish up the sky. And yeah, this is where I was saying that putting the background context in, even if it's not what's in your reference, but but you just give it a sky and a ground is really important because it does, like I said, it shapes the tree. So this is when I sort of get my tree, well, I start to get my tree back on the right track. So I'm just kind of getting my sky in, and then once it's in, I use some more paint to sort of cut away at the parts that I don't like and work on the shape again. But yeah, I was unsure if this was a video that people would even want to see. I think as someone who has been heavily relying on YouTube to learn how to paint, something I noticed was missing was the perspectives of people who are just kind of starting out and maybe have minimal painting experience. I think it's important to hear from those videos as well and those creators as well, because it's been a long time for some of these really seasoned pros who have had a channel teaching for ages, and they are great, and I subscribe to so many of their channels, but I think also hearing from someone who's just starting out can be at times a bit more relatable, because it's fresh in my mind. The struggles I'm going through are fresh, and so I feel like I could make a whole video just about what teaching or what painting every day for 6 months has taught me. So if that is something people are interested in watching, let me know. But here is where I was talking about using the sky to cut back into my tree and kind of get a shape that I'm happier with. You can see that it got really crazy there towards the end. I guess that's what they say is things have to get really messy before they get good again. But yes, it is time again for the grass. Trying to bring a more saturated, brighter green towards the front. And I think I was a bit more successful in this version than the last one, maybe because there's a lot more grass in this image that I'm working from than the first tree study. But I do really like to use these up strokes like this for grass, especially when I'm doing the shadows in the grass and just the variation of color in the grass. I like the texture it creates. And now I'm just going back because, as I said earlier, it was still a little too dark back there. So I'm brightening it. It's a little hard to see what's going on, but I think when I show the other angle, you'll see it a bit better. In the reference, there are these like yellow flowers, so it's kind of, I'm just sort of indicating them here. I like when different textures overlap in shadows. I think that's quite fun to paint. But now I'm just bringing some subtle textures and different color variations in the grass. But that's it for my 2 tree studies. I think 2 is plenty for a video, and even though there are 4 sections, I'll give you a good tape pull reveal anyway. So here they are. I'm really pleased with how they turned out actually, and they're tree studies. They're just, they're not meant to be fully finished work, and I love doing them. If you liked watching this, let me know and I can always do more. Otherwise, thank you so much for sticking around. Bye!